All right, so in order to solve by factoring, we use what's called the zero product property. Sounds fancy, it's really not that big of a deal. I don't care that you remember that it's called that, just as long as you know how to use it. That's all I care about. So take a look here. If A times B equals 0, then what must be true? If A times B equals 0, one of them is 0. Good. Then either A equals 0 or B equals 0. Right? Because if I'm going to multiply two things together and get 0 for an answer, one of them has to be 0. All right, so take a look here. We're starting kind of slow here. Notice here we just have like one term equal to 0. Here I have, it looks like they pulled out a GCF equal to 0, and here I have the two factors equal to 0. So kind of taking a look at how all three of these work. So 5 times x equals 0. What would you do to solve this? X has to equal 0, right? Based on what we just talked about up here, if you're going to multiply two things together, one of them has to equal 0. Okay? Here, what would x equal? This one could equal 0, right? X could equal 0, or x minus 3 equals 0. So really what I'm doing is I'm taking each factor and you're setting them equal to 0. Now this one's already solved, but how do you solve this one? Yeah, just add 3 to the other side. So then x would equal 3. So you have your two answers. Now I want to make sure you're understanding what this is doing, because if I plug in 0 for x, okay, that would be 0 times 0 minus 3. What's 0 minus 3? 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And then you multiply that times 0 and you get 0. So it works. You got it to equal 0. Okay, if I do it this way and I plug that in, then I'm plugging in a 3. What's 3 minus 3? 0 times 3, 0. So no matter which value of x I'm plugging into it, it still equals 0 in the end, so it doesn't matter. So this is going to have two answers. Over here, one of these has to be 0, right? So either x plus 2 has to equal 0, or x minus 1 has to equal 0. One or the other must equal 0 for that whole thing to equal 0. Okay, so we set each one equal to 0, and then we solve. So we'll subtract 2. So x would equal negative 2. I'll add 1. So x equals 1. Not so bad today, right? Doing all right? Real quick, take a look up here at the top of the graph. This is just about the little bit of graphing we're going to talk about today. Anything that we're factoring and solving, if you would actually graph them, what's going to happen is where they're crossing the x-axis, where the y value is 0, setting it equal to 0, right there where it's crossing, those are your answers. So like if I would graph this one, it would cross the x-axis at negative 2 and 1. I can look at a graph. The answers here are going to be x equals 3 and x equals 6. I had to see what that was. Okay, so that's something we'll talk about more in Chapter 5, but as you look at a graph wherever it crosses, those are your answers. All right, so steps for solving by factoring for you step-by-step people out there. All right, step 1, put the equation in standard form. Do you know what standard form is? What? Nope. You've probably seen it before. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Ooh. That's called standard form. In other words, they're in order, right? The x squared, then the x, then the number, and it's set equal to 0. So that's standard form. So if you ever hear that, that's what it's referring to. Step 2, you're going to factor it completely. So everything we've been working on the past week or so, all that factoring. And then step 3, set each factor, just like we did on the previous page, equal to 0, and solve. All right, so here we go. Number 1, solve each equation by factoring. And then check your answer. You can do your check kind of mentally as well. You don't always have to show your work on that. But, okay, step 1, put it in standard form. Is number 1 in standard form already? Yeah, here's your x squared, your x, your number equals 0. Okay, so we're good there. Step 2, we want to factor. Is there a GCF? Nope, no GCF. So we're going to go ahead and set up our parentheses to factor. Your last one's negative, so what are your signs? Plus, minus, good. What are your options for A? Good, x and x. All right, options for C? I know some of you figured it out, but 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Which one's positive? 6 and the 3. And again, checking your answer, making sure you factored it correctly. So that would give me 6x minus 3x is a positive 3x. So we know it works. Okay. So I did my check, make sure it worked. And then step 3, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x plus 6 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and we solve each one. So subtract 6, x equals negative 6, add 3, x equals 3. Yeah, you guys would have since you were in intermediate. How are we feeling so far? Now, I want you to make sure you're aware of the difference because it's going to show up on your quiz over all this stuff. What we did the last couple days, did you have an equal sign? No. So can you solve without an equal sign? So everything I've given you up to now, you couldn't have solved because there was no equal sign. Okay? So you have to be able to have an equal sign. You cannot just stick an equal 0 on the end of a problem and call it good. I have a lot of students who try to do that. All right, if there's no equal sign, you can factor it, and that's as far as you can go. If there's an equal sign, factor it and solve. Okay? All right, number 2. Okay, step 1, put it in standard form. What needs to move? The negative 12. How do you move a negative 12? Add 12. So it's going to be x squared minus 7x plus 12 equals 0. Right? You have to add it to the other side. Right, after it's set equal to 0, right, in standard form, we want to factor. Is there a GCF? No. So set up your parentheses. Last one's positive. What are your signs? They're both negative. For moments at a question, or you just want to answer for me? Oh. Options for A? X and X. Yeah, give me the list, Ramon. Options for 12? And which one's going to be the right answer? Good. And again, we can check. For those of you who aren't confident there, it would be negative 3x minus 4x gives me negative 7x. So make sure it works. For my sake of space, I'm going to erase my checking. All right, your next step is set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Good. Good. So then we solve each one. So x equals 3 and x equals 4. Now, one thing I want to kind of point out to you guys, and this will kind of keep coming up as we move into chapter 5 and whatnot, but notice your exponent is an x squared. How many answers do we have? So if it was an x cubed, how many answers would you have? X to the 4th, you'd have 4. Yeah, so this chapter, chapter 4, is all about x squared. It's called quadratic. So everything we find is going to have 2 answers. Okay, when we move into chapter 5, we'll talk about x cubed, x to the 4th, x to the 5th, and you'll have a lot more answers. Jessica? Six and 1, but I'm trying to get a 12. All right, how about number 3? Yep, got to move it over, right? We got to set it in standard form. It's got to be equal to 0. So it'll be 4x squared when I move the 3x minus 3x. This type of problem throws students more than any other type of problem. Because the next step is to factor. What's your GCF? X. For whatever reason, people freak out and they don't take out just the easy step here. Take out the X. Good. Can I factor that any further? Two terms. No. They're not both perfect squares, right? You don't even have an x squared anymore, so you can't keep going there. All right, so set each one equal to 0. So x equals 0. That's one of your factors. And then 4x minus 3 equals 0. Don't let the easy ones be the one that trips you up, okay? So x equals 0. No solving needed there. Over here, we'll have to add 3 and divide by 4. So we get x equals 0 and x equals 3/4. Questions so far? Good. Number 4, similar to a problem you had on the cut-up worksheet things yesterday, the little half sheets. Is it in standard form? Is the set equal to 0? The set equal to 0. We're good. There's not an x, but that's okay. Take out the negative 2. Yeah, guys, if that first one's negative, I can't stress that enough. You have to take it out, okay? And 2 goes into them both, so I'm actually going to take out a negative 2. Now be careful when you're taking out negatives because it's going to affect your signs. So negative 2x squared divided by negative 2, just x squared. And then 18 divided by negative 2, negative 9. Can you now factor that further? Two terms. Are they both perfect squares? Yeah, what's the square root of x squared? X. Yeah, so this actually goes further now. What are your signs? Plus and minus. Square root of x squared. Square root of 9. Remember, that's your difference of squares there. Those are the ones that we liked. You guys did a whole page of those in like 5 minutes. Baby brother. So there it is, completely factored. Next step is set each factor equal to 0 and solve. What do I do with my baby brother? Does my baby brother give me an answer? I only get an answer when there's an x, right? So do I set negative 2 equal to 0? That looks funny, right? That's not true. That does not give me an answer. Here, I'm allowed to forget about baby brother now. All right? He doesn't give me an answer. Now, if there was an x with my baby brother, he'd give me an answer. But if there's no x, I really don't have to worry about him. So we'll set x plus 3 equal to 0 and x minus 3 equal to 0. And we can solve those. Okay? But I'm only solving where there's an x. So subtract 3. X equals negative 3. Add 3. X equals positive 3. And keep in mind how many answers you should have. This problem started off as x squared. So if you somehow put baby brother in there as one of your answers, you're going to have too many answers. Okay? All right, why don't you guys try number 5 on your own? All right, in this problem, we need to set it equal to 0. Most of you tried to do that. Some of you went the really long route. What should I move? I wouldn't move the 2. Ramon? I'd move the other stuff. Why would I not move the 2? It becomes negative. And then if my first term's negative, what do I have to do? I have to take it all back out again. So instead of that, I'm going to always kind of move things so my first term stays positive. So then I will move the 5x over, becomes plus 5x. Move the 3 over, becomes minus 3. If you move the 2x, that's fine, but then you had to take out the negative 1 and flip all your signs again. So it took you extra steps. It's just easier to move things wherever your x squared can stay positive. Okay? Just kind of saves you a little work. Is there a GCF in this whole thing? No. I saw some of you taking out an X. Some of you were trying to take out a 2. Nothing goes into all of them. So we have to set up our parentheses. If you moved it correctly, and it looks like this, what should your signs be? A plus and a minus. Some of you moved things wrong, and then it messed up your signs, so then you thought you had it right, and you actually didn't because your signs were wrong. All right, options for A. So 2x and 1x. And we have 1 and 3. So if we check this, that gives me 1x. That gives me negative 6x. That gives me negative 5x. So what? I need to change my signs, yeah. It's not going to work. Does your problem up here have a positive 5x and a negative 3? What did you have down? Tell me what you have. If I check this, that gives me negative 2x. That gives me a positive 3x. That gives me 1x. Yeah, gotta watch them signs. All right, from there we set each one equal to 0. So 2x minus 1 equals 0. X plus 3 equals 0. So we'll add 1. Divide by 2. So x equals half. And over here we just have to subtract 3. Now, guys, as time goes on, I'm going to stop showing that work. Okay? Eventually, only thing that you'll see on something that I'm doing with you guys is I'll go from here to I'll have it factored to here's my answers. Because let's be honest, can you do these in your head? You should be able to. Okay, here for like the first little while, I'll show you all that work until it's kind of cemented in your head, the process, and then I'm slowly going to stop showing that. And I'm fine with you guys as well. If you're comfortable not showing the work where you're subtracting or adding or whatever, that's fine. Okay, if you're comfortable. All right, Ramon, what do I do first? I don't have a negative 6. Okay, yeah, okay. Where do I want to put it? In the middle, good. So 20x squared, he's right, minus 6x, and he said that's the b, very nice, minus 2 equals 0. Right, we had to move this, turns into a negative. To put in the right order, it has to go in the middle. All right, Ramon, then what? Which is? 2. Good, we'll take out the 2. Minus 1, good. I'm noticing a lot of students, when they go to take this up, they're like, oh, a 2, and they don't put anything here. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Okay, if you have 3 terms, you should still have 3 terms. Okay, that doesn't change. All right, from there, Ramon, does that factor further? It factors further. We want to factor it. This is what factor means. All right, Ramon, what are my signs? Yeah, he doesn't listen. That's okay. All right, what are my signs, Ramon? Thank you. Options over here for C? Just 1? And 1. Okay. I got to make sure. I got to have 1 to put in each spot, right? All right, you want to go 1 and 10 or 2 and 5? 2 and 5, so 2x, 5x. You want to go 1 and 1 or 1 and 1? Are you sure? Positive? Okay. All right, so we should probably check, make sure that worked, right? So we get 5x minus 2x gives me positive 3x. My signs are backwards. So that's the plus, that's the minus. Okay. Ramon, then what? Yep. Good. Do I set The 2 to 0? No, there's no x here, so I'm not solving for this. I can forget him now because there's no x with him. Okay, so I set each one equal to 0 and then solve each one. So add 1. 2x equals 1, divide by 2. So we get x equals half. Subtract 1, divide by 5, so negative 1/5. How are we feeling? A little better? Getting there? Ramon? No, let's share the wealth a little bit, okay? We'll share it a little bit. All right, so number 7. Jessica, what's the first thing I do? Nope. Number 7. Yeah, I need to move this over. So 4x squared minus 28x. When I move this, it becomes plus 48. Guys, I hear a lot of extra chatter right now. All right, so I set it equal to 0. Then, Caleb, what do I do next? Which is? Good, which is a 4. So, Caleb, what do I have left when I take out the 4? It's 12. Good, so we take out our greatest common factor. All right, now once we take that out, we want to try to factor this further. Jacob, what are my signs? Last one's positive. So what does that tell you about your signs? They're the same. Good. Anna, what are my options for A? And my options for C? Do you know which ones I want to use? Anybody else have an opinion? Which ones? 3 and 4? Because again, if we check, we get negative 3x minus 4x, which is negative 7x. So it does work. Right? Good. Set them equal to 0. Do I set the baby brother equal to 0? No. There's no x. If he had an x, would I? Yeah, there's no x, so I'm going to leave him. So x minus 3 equals 0. Eventually he will. Yeah. So we'll add 3. Add 4. And we're done. All right. 2 last problems to work through. You guys ready? Yeah. Way to be excited. Ready? Yes, we're ready. All right, number 8. I got some extra stuff going on here, right? Good, very good. Guys, on this one, I have x's on both sides, but we know we need to move everything, right? So when I go to subtract this x, that becomes 7x. Right? If you have like terms, you can actually put those together. And then what am I going to have? Minus 5 equals 0, right? Because we subtract that over. So yeah, if you have some extra stuff, there's like terms, just go ahead and put those together. All right. From there, Kelsey, is there a GCF? There is not. All right, so if there's no GCF, we'll go ahead and set up our parentheses. Sean, what are my signs? Good. Last one's negative, so they're going to be opposites. All right. Mariah, what are my options for A? And my options for C? Okay. Marcus, you want to go 1 and 6 or 2 and 3? 1 and 6. So 1x and 6x. All right. So we got 1 and 5. So if we check, we get 6x minus 5x. Does that make 7? No. If I flip-flop my 1 and my 5, does that help? That makes 30. That's way off. All right, so we know it's not the 1 and the 6 then. 2 and 3? That's 15x minus 2x. So we flip them. Whew, so many things to try. All right, so that gives me 3x minus 10x is negative 7x. Good? Now my signs are backwards. All right, but guys, needless to say, if you're working through factoring, don't give up on it, okay? Try some things. If it doesn't work, try something else, try something else. Eventually it will work, okay? Everything I'm giving you will factor. All right, so then we set each one equal to 0. 2x minus 1 equals 0. 3x plus 5 equals 0. And then we solve. They are going to both be fractions. So add 1, divide by 2. So x equals half. Subtract 5. Divide by 3. So x equals negative 5/3. All right, last problem on your own. On your own. All right, here we go. Ramon, what's the first thing I do? Good. So we get 9x squared minus 16 equals 0. Now, guys, I want you to make sure you're noticing how many terms you have. If you have 2 terms, we only know how to factor it, other than taking out a GCF, is difference of squares. Are they both squares? Yeah, they're both squares. Uh-huh. Because you got it wrong. So it was IXL's fault. Mm-hmm. You should always look for that. So how do I finish this? Good. And we set each one equal to 0. So when we solve, we should get x equals negative 4/3 and x equals a positive 4/3. All right, so how are we feeling? We just learned how to solve by factoring today. You all right? Okay, so your assignment, I'm going to give you guys the rest of class. We got a good chunk of time today. Your assignment is a color by number picture. Also, make notes, because I'm not handing out a paper for it. New IXL assignments. It's under Algebra 1, BB7. You have to get a 90 this time. If you get 100, it is a bonus point. It is due by Monday at the end of class. Monday, we are going to have a quiz over just factoring and solving by factoring. So we'll spend some time reviewing on Monday. We'll take the quiz, and then any time you have, if you didn't finish your IXL, you can finish it up. Okay, so I'll give you to the end of class Monday for this one. How many of you did not finish IXL, which was due at the start of class today? Oh. How many of you didn't do any of it?